Welcome to the Grit and Grow podcast, where we talk to guests who are pursuing excellence in both sport and life, who encourage and motivate us to become better mentors, coaches, parents, and athletes. My name is Shane Sowden, head men's basketball coach at Briarcrest College, and also your co-host.
And my name is Justin Simpkins, co-host and director of Prairie Hockey Academy. Hey, it's Justin. If you caught part one with Jamie Gilbert, you already know it wasn't just about sport. It was about heart. In this episode, Jamie takes us deeper into what it means to compete without comparing and why sometimes the best lessons come right after the sting of losing. He shares this story about a penalty shootout where a bunch of 14-year-olds learned more about courage and trust in 5 minutes than most of us do an entire season. This one's about crafting those kinds of moments, the kind that last. Enjoy part 2 with Jamie Gilbert. You're seeing athletes on the other side that's, it's being held back because they don't want to belittle or make somebody. And I guess what I'm saying is philosophically, can we get young athletes as coaches, U14, you're coaching a high level U14 soccer team, boys soccer with your son. Can we get them there, or does it require so much slow learning to be where we're like a veteran player and we're going, hey, I've actually scored enough, over my years, and now I just want to make you better because I'm, 30 and I've done this for a while.
Yeah,
I just wonder.
I would like that understanding, that learning doesn't happen so late in the game, so to speak, for all of us. And I think a term that I've come across from a mentor of mine. He talks about situation crafting situations in the classroom or on the field that can cause people to learn. And so he talks about crafting situation. My Bible college professor, he talked about the Shema and Deuteronomy of teach these things to your kid. To teach means more so to cause somebody to learn. It's to do whatever is necessary to make sure that there's an opportunity for them to grab it, to pick it up, or even to stumble upon it. And so, I think what I've learned a whole lot in the last 2 years in my classroom and in soccer is about crafting situations and crafting environments that allows people to grab onto it. The hard part, I think, that we face, Justin, is all the information about sports comes from professional sports, or it comes from the elite level. And unfortunately, when you listen to the commentary, the language that they consistently use of, he's a great player, he's a smashing player, oh, he's a prodigy, these kind of things, those don't really do any help to the whole thing. Right. Then, I don't know how it is for you, but my club that I coach in, it's a volunteer position. I don't get paid to coach. It's radically different than just about every other situation here in Oklahoma. And they create the infrastructure for me, and I get to set the table however I want. It's got its challenges with that, but I've been able to hold on to a group of kids this last year at tryouts. And I held on to all of them and didn't go out looking for better players who were more athletic. At this age, the athleticism at 13, 14, you get some, early bloomers, and you can win everything if you just get the right athletes. But I got a lot of stick from parents. I got a lot of stick from other coaches about holding on to all the guys. And I said to them that the speed of trust is very slow. And if I'm going to create an environment where guys can learn and really truly care about each other and learn the craft, then we've got to have an environment where trust can be at the base. And I think it's Stephen Covey may have the book Speed of Trust. I haven't read the whole thing, but just the idea of we all three of us know trust is not going to happen in a year. There are not enough life experiences that are going to happen where they can see that we truly mean what we say. And so I held on to all the players except for one who was going to go do another sport. And we created an environment. We're continually trying to create this environment where guys can understand that we value them as people, but we also value that they're moving to the edge of their ability, that they're wanting to grow. So it's equal parts difficult conversations and equal parts gentle care. My team just lost the other day in a penalty shootout in the last the championship of a tournament, a final that we were winning 3-1 until the last 5 minutes, and the other team tied it. And the boys lost in shootout. And I said to all the parents and to the boys afterwards, I said, I'm so delighted for this experience. And I genuinely mean it. No, if I told you where this tournament was, you wouldn't even know the city. And it's not going to be, any kind of mark on their career. But they got a chance to walk out in a penalty shootout, to walk 40 yards to the penalty box by yourself, pick up a soccer ball in front of everybody watching, and experience an experience that you can't fabricate otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a part of many penalty shootouts. I've had many life experiences, and there's nothing I've experienced that is quite like stepping up to take a penalty in a final. There just isn't anything like it. And so circling back with the boys on Tuesday, I smiling, just saying, "Hey guys, what did you experience? Like, what if you had to choose words to describe that walkout in that moment? What were they?" And it was really cool to be able to process with them how they experienced it, and we didn't take great penalties. And I said, "Great, we're probably going to be in that situation over the next 4 years, probably 10 more times. What do you think it's going to take to be able to step up and smash that ball with conviction?" And we walked through that process of, okay, what do I need to be doing consistently, weekly, in terms of taking penalties? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
great. How can we recreate that pressure? And they had no idea. And so I told them, I said, I got a great idea for this. We're going to increase your heart rate by running every time we miss, and somebody's got to run, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but do you think it's going to make us better? And they were like, yeah. It's like, you think next time we step up against another team, we'll be better if we've done that 10 times leading into the next tournament? Yeah. It's like, all right, here we go. So with that, I think crafting the situation and using the moments that you have that are in front of you, I try to be very intentional about that. I spend way less time on X's and O's, tactics. I spend way less time on technical details of skills. Um, and and I get a lot of pushback from a lot of coaches about this, but I really truly believe that if I can create a team that has teammates, true teammates on it, one, they're going to have loved their experience in youth soccer. Two, they're going to be useful to any sort of team that they're going to go to moving forward. Um, and and more so just leaning more towards the first one, that they really enjoy this period of time that they get playing soccer, because it's so short, and it's not the norm that people actually love their sport. Um, and so I think you can do all those things, but like situation crafting is the word. It's the concept that comes to my mind all the time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think situation crafting it's helping me. I mean, it sounds a lot like the book "Every Moment Matters" by John O'Sullivan. If you've read any of John's work as a soccer coach, he's got some great stuff. "Every Moment Matters" is good. It's I almost look at it as like a textbook for coaches, and in so many regards. So soccer coach, but that situation crafting idea, like every moment matters, and you plan it out. And at the same time, with what you just said, like Jason Caldwell from if you've seen, there's a documentary called Chasing, talks about Jason and his team rowing the Atlantic, and just the different teams that he forms. And the first one was so technical and so experienced. He had the best of the best team, and just faltered. And so he decided to try it out again. And this time they didn't do that. They didn't go after the most decorated, the best athlete. They went after people that they didn't train together much. They just broke bread together. They just enjoyed being around each other. They had their spouses out. They just spent time together. Like once they realized they loved each other, then it was really easy to build a team that could row across the Atlantic. Right. Anyway, some neat ideas, but situation crafting, I like that takeaway.
I love hearing your perspective on your shift in your mindset towards training, honing your craft in order to serve others. Once you started doing that, what was the best part of that? Because I think we talk about it, but our players don't really get it. They're like, well, yeah, that's great in principle, but because they're not there. Yeah. When you made that shift and it started happening, what did that feel like, and what was the best part of that?
The best part of it was the relationship. So seeing other people maybe unlock a new level for themselves, um, or the connection of being able to score. Setting somebody else up to be able to score just became a delight for me. Um, Moving somebody into position, using my voice that was going to set them up for success was a delight for me. Um, and it created real relationships off the field. And so that for me was great. I think the challenge with that, Shane, is that that's not that's taboo to say in high level sports realm. Is that that's good enough or that's okay? There is so much rah, hard nose, gotta grind, gotta beat the next guy next to you. This guy's out for your paycheck, out for your shirt. That it almost makes you. I just get the picture of like a dog that's been beaten and just becomes mean and doesn't want to be, doesn't have to be. um, I look at. I've always been interested in the best teams, like or not always. So the last like 15 years, I've been really interested in the best teams. Um, I really don't get excited about any one individual player in world soccer, and it drives people around me nuts. They hate it. Um, and but I remember I forget which Euros it is now, but the Euros there was Greece ended up winning the European Championships a number of years ago, and you couldn't name but one player on that team. I think Iceland was really close to doing it in more recent years. And it was awesome. What a joy to watch. And everybody talked about how dogged they were and how much they were for each other. And that, that they stacked groceries in the grocery store back home. And here they are on the European stage. And I absolutely loved it because
Yep.
to me, that was a story worth living. Um, and that's the kind of stuff that's really going to matter later on. Is those kind of connections and those relationships. To go back to what you asked about how how you how that made a shift for me, and kind of how I go about it with other people is I try to make sure those stories are known. Um, so I reach back out to players that I talked to or I played with, and I ask them, "Hey, what were your favorite moments?" And nobody ever talks about a championship. They talk
Hmm.
about the times in the locker room. They talk about the bus rides, and they talk about the hardest moments that we went through. And so, uh, 2 years ago, our high school team was getting ready to play a JV team, and it was miserably cold outside. It was like 33, just warm enough that it wasn't freezing. So we were going to play, and it started raining, and the wind was howling, it was blowing. And so I told the guys on my team the story of just getting back with my college teammates and remembering those moments that were the absolute hardest became the most joy. And so we came out to this game, and we all said, hey, nobody's going to talk about the weather. We just agreed it. We all said, hey, real quick, you got 30 seconds. What do you want to say about today's conditions? And they all just like full heartedly said, this sucks. I don't want to go out there. And we said, great. From now on, we're just going to take it. So we get out there and it's miserably cold. And the other team brought a tent, like one of those little pop up tents. And we're getting ready, we're warming up and it's freezing. And I just stopped the guys and said, hey guys, look over there. And they're holding onto their tent. Their tent's bent. It's fallen in half. It's broken in half. It's all twisted. And the guys were like, yeah, yeah, love it. And we came out and hopped all over this team. It was awesome. But what's funny is, some of those guys have graduated. And the one thing that they always talk about is that game. There was a kid who got hypothermia. Like we had to take him to the hospital, and they talk about that game. That's like the crowning moment. And so I think part of it is, narrative matters. What we say, the things that we value, they're going to try to live up to. Um, and so the stories that I try to give them, the information that I try to give them, are stories of things that are real. It has nothing to do with a trophy. It has nothing to do with who went to a Division I school. It has nothing to do with professional players playing professionally. It has everything to do with growing as young men and the relationships you have. So I try to tell those stories to let them know that those things matter where I can. I try to find those stories of other people saying the same thing because the information that we get all the time is, in direct opposition to that whole narrative. So I try to situation crafting. I try to craft that narrative, but also I don't lie. I really don't care about quote unquote special players or the best in whatever position. People press me all the time on, Ronaldo or Messi, and I say neither. Um, I don't think they're the best player. I ask people to rate them as defenders, and they said, well, yeah, they're terrible defenders. I'm like, all right, so what's a great player? I think a great player is, someone who's plugging into the team. That kind of stuff just gets me excited. But to go to a book, Joshua put me onto a book called, I think it's called The Captain's Class. And there's a guy, if you guys know it, and it was really interesting to see who was on that list and who wasn't.
Yeah.
And looking back at that, I'm like, yeah, those are the kind of guys that I would have loved playing with, and I would have loved having those relationships later in life. So I think a big part of it is the information that we're putting in front of them. And we try to be pretty particular about that. But I'll be honest, my heart is so much 100% that it comes out. I really don't care about the medals or anything. So.
Hey everyone, it's Shane here. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know I'm passionate about coaching. Not just running practices or drawing up plays, but building culture, leading well, and helping athletes grow as people. For me, one of the biggest game changers in my coaching journey has been working with my mentor, JP Nurbin, and his program at TOC Culture. Now, TOC is all about transformational coaching, giving you a clear framework, the tools you need, and the accountability to apply them with your team. And now they've launched something brand new, the Coaches Gym. It's an all-inclusive hub for transformational coaches. Inside, you'll find courses on working with sports parents, managing playing time without the drama, building the foundations of great coaching, and earning your transformational coaching and culture certification. Plus, there's an entire library of ready-to-use tools and systems to equip you to build a championship culture, and a private community of coaches who are walking the same path you are. Now, I started working with JP back in 2018, and it was a game changer for me as a coach in my program. I've gone through the certification process, I've used the tools, and it's been massive in our success the last few years of building a championship culture, both on and off the court. If you're serious about becoming the kind of coach your players remember for life, you've got to check it out. And because you're a Grit and Growth listener, you can save $50 when you sign up. Just go to tocculture.com and enter Grit Growth as the coupon code. That's all caps, one word, GRITGROWTH.
Listen, you've dripped this idea of compete, don't compare on us a couple times in this conversation. We've talked about it being one of your, I guess your first sole authored book, yourself, and it came out as the Principal Circle. But long story short, I think you have a message on compete, don't compare, and I just want to give you space for a couple minutes to share that with us.
Yeah. When I was, like I said, when I stepped away from Train to Be Clutch, I threw a lot of the stuff that I was writing and teaching and thinking. I threw it at the Bible and just said, does this sound the same? And some of it did, some of it did not. And I had already had the idea of compete, don't compare years before. But when I started digging into some of the word studies, some of the Greek in the New Testament, the word compete actually came up in Philippians chapter 1, and 1 and verse 27. And Paul's writing here to the Philippians, and he's telling the people to stay together, standing firm in one spirit, one mind. And he uses this word striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. And this word to strive is the word compete. And it's the picture of a wrestler training against another wrestler, and one wrestler has to give his absolute best if he's going to make the other wrestler as good as he can be. The idea that only iron sharpens iron, so you have to be giving your best in order for other people around you to get better. And that really struck me when I spent some time meditating on it and praying on it. The idea of competing, and competing being a healthy thing. Competing means something that we're actually called to do. And it had less to do with comparison, and it had less to do with status. You're not competing so that one person's the winner and the other person's the loser. So that one person is in first place, one person's in second place. You're doing it, you're mutually competing so that everybody is better. And so when you put that in the context of a team, when you go to training, and this goes back to the player who has amazing ability and potential and is choosing not to use it. This is where I bring this out, and I talk about this idea of if you're not giving your absolute best, if you're not knocking that player over and running past him because you can, he doesn't have to run as fast as he can to catch up to you. You're
Right.
actually limiting your teammate. And so that really shaped a lot for me, of learning how to look at other people around me and use them as less of a measuring stick. Where do I compare to them? But really looking at them as kind of like a rubric. Like, so they're really good at these things. How did they get there? What is it that they do that makes them really good at these? So when I walked onto the Colorado Rapids the first day, the coach had his partner up for one-on-one drills, and I looked to the guy to the right of me, and this guy is Pablo Mastrioni. He currently played for the U.S. national team, and he was kind of a legend. He's played in World Cups, and I thought to myself, absolutely not. I looked to my left real quick, and there's a guy named Marvell Wynn. He was the fastest player in the MLS that year, maybe of all time. Absolutely rapid. I said, absolutely not. I turned and looked behind me. There's a guy named Andre Akpan, who's this up and coming guy I knew about, and I said no. And this all happened in like a second and a half. And then I found the guy to the right of me, behind me, and he was 5'3", 120-pound, 16-year-old kid named Brian, who was who was on a part of the youth league and got a hall pass to get out of geometry to come and train with the Rapids. Um, I chose him because I knew that I would look good. Well, it turns out Brian was better than me, so I didn't look very good at all. But from then, that was where I kind of adopted this growth mindset, and I started to seek out the guys who were really good. So after that, I started going against Pablo, and I would study him. And even though I was getting beat 9-0, I was looking at what made him great, and I would replay that over and over again. Why was he beating me? What did he do with his hips? How did he shuffle his feet? What was his body positioning like? And it got to the point where I could actually hang in 1v1 duels. And if I ever beat him, he'd kick me really hard to let me know I wasn't better than him. But I improved all the while. And so competing is looking at other people and seeing what they do really well, what they bring to the table. Can you add that to your game? Can you add that to your life? How did they get there? What do they do that makes them good at those things? And I had one awesome experience. I think this one needs to be a kid's book, which is another thing I didn't tell you guys. I write kids' books as well, like little kids' books. I've had a good time with that. But I had a real client named Michelle, and she was a professional goalkeeper. And when she came to me, she was really frustrated by her experience because where she played previously in New York, she played behind the #1 U.S. goalkeeper in soccer, and so she didn't play ever in New York. When she moved to this new team in Portland, right after she moved there, they signed the #1 goalkeeper in the world, who was the German goalkeeper. And so my friend Michelle, she'd said to me, I'm really frustrated at my situation. And I said to her, I'm not trying to be positive, but you have to be the only person in the world who has the best internship opportunity at your position. You've got two of the world's best, maybe the greatest of all time that you've gotten to train with. Not only just play next to them, but every single day you see their process. And so I asked her, I said, is Hope good at everything? No. What is she really good at? And she listed all those things out. And I said, is Nadine really good at everything? No. But what is she really good at? What makes her really good at those things? And so we put them together kind of like a Venn diagram. And I said, Michelle, what are you really good at? How can we make this hybrid of a player that connects all these things? And so we went through that process, and over, I want to say it was 6 months, she had a ton of growth to the point where at the beginning of the new season, her coach came in and said, I don't know how you did it. And she said, what? What did I do? And he said, you beat out the #1 goalkeeper in the world. Like every coach in the organization, every person in the organization thinks you should start. And so the start is yours. So she started the first game of the season, and she kept a clean sheet. She made a couple saves. It was awesome. And, that's where the book would end, Shane. But the next day, the German goalkeeper came in and said, if I'm not playing, I'm leaving because it's a World Cup year. So in the summer, they were going to be playing in the World Cup and she needed games, and, totally fine. So Michelle wasn't playing again for about 4 months. But she stuck to the process, just trying to get better, trying to compete, trying to make Nadine better as well in the process. And when the World Cup happened and Nadine went on, Michelle stepped up. She was the player of the year. She even scored a goal, first goalkeeper to score a goal in women's soccer. Yeah, I think, I'm pretty sure she scored a goal in like one of the biggest games of the year, became player of the year. But it was a long journey and a process, but it was this whole thing of competing rather than comparing. And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck, is we feel like we have to be better than somebody else instead of just saying we need to be better. How can I come alongside somebody else to get better? And so that's been a big focus of mine. And I just think that's so I talked about Philippians 1, this idea of striving side by side. Literally in Philippians 2, right down from there, Paul's encouraging the Christians. Chapter 2, verse 2, he says, "Complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord with one mind. Do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant than yourselves. Don't look out. Let each of you not only look out for his own interest, but the interests of others." And that's a part of me now that wasn't a part of me when I was playing. And I didn't know that was okay. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies in professional sports, high level sports, is that it's not okay to think less of yourself. And there's times as coaches where, we can clearly say that we're like, stop being so selfish. But how much of everything else that we're doing in terms of skill development is just about you? It's just about the single individual. So that for me is kind of a rubric right there for how to get better at what you're doing and have a lasting impact. Have an impact that actually means something later on, because I'm sure you guys would know a lot of hockey players, but I'm around a lot of soccer players, and I ask them all the time who won the FIFA World Player of the Year, and I pick, whatever year, and they have no idea. Most of the younger kids don't even know about Pele.
Can you just guess Pele and move on?
Yeah, no, they don't even know who Pele is. So just the fleeting significance that has of being at the top level. But the lasting significance that this has of being a person who puts others on, and just the idea that there's a direct correlation to you getting better as well, I think is kind of it's what's the word? It's the obliquitous approach to getting better. And then the last thing I'll say on that, later in chapter 3, verse 17, Paul says this in a number of his letters, but he says, "Imitate me," or join in imitating me. And Paul saw himself as a person that was worth imitating. And in 1 Corinthians, he says, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." And much of what we learn as young humans is just through imitation. Our kids look at us and they see what we do, they see what we don't do, and they do likewise, for good or for bad. And I think that's still the best way to go about learning how to beat on your craft, is by imitating other people. And so a big part of my work is trying to set the table for that.
It's good. It's really good. I appreciate that. I think, I just want to go back and read Philippians right now. And Paul's obviously got this message where he's like, strive, right? Strive together, compete with one another, sharpen each other. But think of yourself less than the other while doing it. And then at the same time, and he's like, and so as an example, imitate me as I imitate Christ. It's a pretty cool 3-point sermon.
He's writing it from a prison cell.
And he's writing it from a prison cell. And so that's been a thing that's like really gripped me over the last couple of years. I've really listened to a lot of Christian martyrs, current martyrs, martyrs from centuries past. And, when you listen to somebody who's been through something and has really given up a lot to stand up for what they believe or do what they feel like they're supposed to do, you've got someone you can really listen to. Somebody who's not just talking a bunch of, glad sayings. They're not just tweeting about things, right? And I think that's what kind of happens when you are when you are focused on relationship and you're in the trenches with other people, you develop that kind of relationship where they know that the words that you say mean something. And that's when I think teams are, boy, they're really effective. But to go back on that, the quote that Joshua brought into my life from C.S. Lewis, I think is appropriate there. When you put the first things first, the second things aren't suppressed; they actually increase. And I really believe if we could help people play from a place of love rather than a place of fear, or even from a place of anger, um, or conceit, they'll actually freely play. And when I don't know about you guys, but I've read a lot of stories of high level athletes, um, that get to the end of their career years later, and they look back and they have no relationships. Great, they were on top of the world, but man, the stuff that was happening inside of them and the pain that they were going through, in the midst of it, it's like, well, that wasn't. Was that worth it? I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, dang it. Here, I thought maybe I had one original thought at the Hockey Academy, but even the C.S. Lewis quote I probably stole from you. So we're good. It's good.
Feel like
Steal like an artist. There it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Hey, quick hitter here before we sign off. I think you've given just a lot of our listeners so much to think about, Jamie, and for myself, but identity reset principle. Like, as you've talked through a lot of this, and if an athlete's listening today and they're going, hey, where am I at? I think it's like, what practical checkpoints help an athlete spot when performance has become their identity? And how do they course correct even mid-season?
Yeah. So, I got the real deal when when my program was taken away from me, when soccer was taken away from me, when Vanderbilt dropped the program, I had a number of guys that stopped playing soccer right then. They weren't going to give up a Vanderbilt education. And there was no soccer team to play for, so they stopped. And so that's all that I heard. I didn't know I could transfer. I didn't know anything. So there was a real moment in my life where it was taken away from me, for a short period of time, where I thought it was taken away from me.
Yeah.
And I realized what that shook up in me. So it was kind of the question of, if I'm not a soccer player, who am I? Like, who am I to my family? Who am I to, my circle around me? Um, so I think that's kind of a question. Um, if there's somebody who has kind of a prominent position or a captain in the team, if the captain's armband or the C is taken off their sweater, what does that mean? I've had the captain's armband taken off me, and that was a really interesting one, walking through that process. Um, I had it both ways. Once it was taken away and I didn't handle it very well. Another time it was taken away and I was just who I was. It didn't affect me at all. I was actually probably a better leader without it. Um, the other thing that I tend to look at is the difference between feel and real. And so sometimes I would instruct people, you have a bad game or a bad day on the ice or at a game, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, or probably better, on a scale of -10 to +10. Um, and try to give justification for, if it was a -2 and you were pulling your team in the wrong direction because of how you played. Why was it a -2 and not a +4? Or why was it a -2 and not a positive or a -6? And what that causes, if you can take the time to do that with the player, what that'll cause them to do is to talk about the specifics of what they did in that session, of that practice or that game, and they can start to get an understanding of, perception versus reality, and how that affects how they engage, how they're engaging with their teammates. And so I think that's a helpful tool that I use. But really, to play that game of, if this got taken away from me, what would I be doing? I I don't know. It's a interesting thing. It's a really helpful thing when you hit rock bottom. That wasn't rock bottom, but it felt like rock bottom for me. And it caused me to realize my identity was completely wrapped up in my sport. And if it was wrapped up in anything that could be taken away from me, not even my sport, anything else, then I'm going to ride this roller coaster the rest of my life. It's got to be on something else. And yeah, I think the other question that I used to ask people is, how are you treating people? So if your performance, was a -2, how was your engagement with your team on a separate scale? and see that across the course of a season. So when your performance is really high, what's your engagement been like with your team? It's probably going to be pretty high.
Right.
If your engagement with the team is really low when you play really low, you can see that correlation. I do that with communication for our team. The idea that the best way to get out of a low performance is actually to talk more, even though that's what you feel like doing, what you don't feel like doing at all. You don't have the right to have a voice. So I think that's kind of helpful. And then us as coaches, if you do have a coach that can craft that situation, staying consistent with valuing the growth in that area, not necessarily the performance. I tell guys all the time when they have a great performance, I'm like, hey, I'm excited for you. But I really don't care that you scored that goal. I care that you've been in this process learning what led to it. What have you been doing? Tell me about the last 5 weeks, what you've been doing. So I try not to get hype about those and make sure I stay consistent on the things that I really care about. And I think things that matter most.
Good. Jamie, thanks for your time. Really appreciate having you on the show, man. This was great just to hear from you, hear your heart. Have you just really share some of the stuff that's been working, that God's been working on your heart as you're back in Oklahoma and teaching and coaching soccer. And just thrilled to be able to share a lot of this with our listeners today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the offer, and it's great to hear from some like-minded people like yourselves.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, and just thank you for the mentorship and the friendship and your writings, and just it's made a difference. So thank you for doing that.
That's awesome. And I'll just say the best part of this conversation is just knowing that however poor I felt like my writing and my deliverance was of information, that it had an effect, but it had an effect beyond me, that I can be taken away from the situation and it's connected other people. And that's really the only way we're going to be able to affect a generation. It's not about a person, it's about us moving forward. And so that really fills my cup today.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Grit and Growth podcast. We hope that you enjoyed today's guest and the answers that they were able to give and the stories they were able to tell. If you did enjoy today's episode, we'd ask that you would just follow or subscribe to our podcast. It does help us get the word out in our message. Thanks again. Have a great day.